We shouldn't be looking at whether we're number one or number three. We should be looking at the cost per lead or the cost per purchase or the ROAS.
Hello, friends. Brian Guerin back with you today on the Millionaire University podcast, and I am joined by Andy Janaitis of PPC Pitbulls, where Andy and his team help great people sell great products online by specializing in pay-per-click advertising, better known as Google Ads, as well as Facebook ads. And our goal today is to help you understand how to start and grow your business profitably with paid ads. Andy and I are a couple of marketing nerds, so we could go all day on this one, but we're going to fill you in on how to get started with heading towards profitability with paid ads. So without further ado, everybody, Andy Janaitis, let's dive right in.
I founded this business in 2020, and we got started running a small agency, running Google Ads, really for any type of client at the time. More recently, we've niched down and tried to focus on an e-commerce client. But yeah, we work with a lot of small to medium businesses, a lot of bootstrap brands, especially in e-commerce. And we run Google Ads primarily, but more broadly, paid ads, Google, YouTube, and Meta.
Paid ads is a gateway, right? It's a gateway to audience, it's a gateway to exposure, and it's a gateway to leads and or sales. And now, Andy, I know you focus mostly in e-commerce, but obviously paid ads can apply across the spectrum, whether you're a service business, a brick and mortar, e-commerce, online type of business, you name it. Coaching, there's all sorts of things that go along with using paid ads to your advantage. So what are the steps? How to start and grow profitably with paid ads? How about you kick it off for me?
Definitely. Yeah. So getting started, obviously, it's a great proposition, right? I'm going to pay a few cents or a few dollars, get myself in front of a client, either in a Google search or in a Meta, somewhere on Facebook, Instagram. They're going to click. I'm going to pay a little bit for that click. They're going to get to my website, buy my product, sign up for a sales call, and ultimately become a customer. So that's awesome. When everything's working, that sounds great. And that's best case scenario. But there's a lot of little gotchas along the way. And I think more often than not, we work with a lot of businesses that come to us either having worked with another agency or just trying to get it started themselves. There's a lot of basic mistakes that people make really around not being ready to get paid ads started. There's some different steps to take before you just jump in and start spending some money on one of these platforms, whether it be Google or Meta. I think for me, the first and foremost there is measurement. So making sure that you're understanding what's actually happening when people come to your site. So a lot of the content you'll see out there around paid ads will be campaign types and what types of creative should we be using and all these different kind of ticky-tacky strategies, which are important. But at the end of the day, most important thing is making sure that you have some basic analytics set up on your website so that when people hit the site, did they ultimately sign up for our sales call, lead call, whatever that outcome is, or purchase a product in the case of e-commerce, and then sending that data back to the platform, whether it be Google Ads or Meta, making sure that you're closing that loop so that the models can learn and improve and make your ads run a little bit better over time.
When you're meeting with prospects, people prospectively looking to work with you, what's the number one question they have when it comes to how do they know when the right time to jump into paid advertising is?
Yeah. So it's different by business, but one of the big things I like to see outside of those measurement pieces that I just spoke about is that you actually have some sales or some level of organic traffic coming through your site and achieving the goals you're looking to achieve. So I'll use achieve the goals generally to mean either make a purchase or sign up for lead or a sales call, essentially. So a lot of times people will come and say, hey, I've built out this beautiful website. I've got all my products up. I'm ready for people to come by. How do I start? What do I do next? And the answer typically that I'll give them is, okay, pump the brakes a little bit before you just start running paid ads and running some traffic to your site that you're not exactly sure if it's going to work or not. You want to get started and make sure that you're getting some purchases organically. So some simple ways to do that would either be friends and family, just reach out through email to your Christmas card list if you need to, and see if you can get some people to come through. Figure out, honestly, like sometimes your site may even be broken or people have come in and tried to make a purchase and it doesn't work. Like that's the type of feedback you want to have before you're spending money to drive traffic to your site. And then as you get a little more sophisticated, it's, hey, I was looking to come into your site, but I didn't quite understand what your products were. Or I wasn't quite sure where to look or what category I should be in. So those are some of those like early problems that you can solve pretty easily just by getting some traffic in and starting to understand what's happening when the customers come to your site. Especially with products, oftentimes one of my favorite strategies is working with either free giveaways or tastings. If you have a business where you're already selling a product, say you're doing like farmers markets or something like that, just go ahead and include with the offers that you have a 10% discount coupon to get people to come to the website and make their next purchase through that channel, as opposed to buying it wherever your current point of sale is. But my first thing is make sure you get everything measured, make sure you understand what's happening on the site. And then next, get some purchases coming in before you really start thinking about paying for traffic to come to the site.
Yeah, it goes back to that proof of concept or proof of product market fit, proof that you can sell the product, that people want it, that they can verify that your product is good to go for being sold to more people. Because without that proof, it makes absolutely no sense to invest any dollars in advertising if the market doesn't want what you're selling. So that makes way too much sense. Now, so let's say you're a young business owner, you're moving along here and you've got the product market fit. You've grown organically to a point where you're maybe even squeaking out some profit, right? You're doing okay. You want to start putting fuel on that fire. The first place that probably most people think of is turning to Google ads, or maybe depending on your product industry, maybe Facebook. But what do you see when folks are coming to you? Are they like, oh my gosh, I need Google, but maybe they really need Meta first?
Yeah. So the way I like to think about that decision, it depends on your product. But the way what I typically tell people is on Google, it's going to be a little bit more profitable at a smaller scale. And then the other kind of way to think about that is on Google, people are already searching for your product. So you know they have that intent. So by the time they click and you're paying for that click, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to convert. So you should have a pretty good high conversion rate. But that doesn't help you if they're not already searching for your product. So if you have the type of product that's it's either a new product where you're trying to create your own category, or it's just the type of product that people don't really know they need until they want it type of thing. Maybe it's an impulse buy kind of thing. That's where Facebook is going to be a little bit better, or Instagram, just Meta in general, because you're getting in front of them and interrupting them while they're doing something else. And you can take that opportunity to educate them about what your product is, let them know, start to build the awareness that your product is even there and exists. And then some of the education around what your key differentiators are and why they should buy your product.
Yeah, because I think that's a very important distinction that we should make is the difference between the audience that is on Google versus Facebook. When you are reaching someone on Google with your advertising, that person is problem aware. They've gone to the Google machine and they've typed in what they're looking for. Like if you run a throwback t-shirt store, I'm going to search throwback t-shirts. And that's where you want to start showing up in those auctions in the paid ads. Now on Facebook, conversely, it is the majority going to be a cold audience. You can run specific audiences and retargeting and such, but in general, that's a place to introduce people to your brand, pick them off the couch, and see if they're interested, whether it's warming them up with traffic campaigns or going straight for the jugular with the purchase campaigns. But those types of folks on Facebook are going to typically take a little bit more nurturing as opposed to those on Google who are problem aware. They're one step ahead on that customer journey from the person who's on Facebook. So,
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And for all those types of things, it falls logically where you're paying a little bit more per click when you're on Google because they're more valuable customers. So competitively, people are paying more per click, whereas you're paying a little less per click coming in from Facebook. But at the same time, like we just said, your chance of converting them might be a little bit lower if they're coming in cold and they're just feeling you out, kicking the tires kind of thing, as opposed to coming in a purchase journey already searching for your product.
Right, exactly. When you're talking with a prospect and they have a limited budget, what are your recommendations for getting them started on paid advertising where you feel they're a good fit, but you do have to start at a lower budget? Is it starting with one platform versus the other? Is it starting with a certain budget on this one versus a certain budget on that one and running them simultaneously? How do you go about that in your world?
Yeah, I would say typically I would start with just one platform, try to find profitability in one place. So we hear a lot about omni-channel experience and making sure that you're touching customers at every point in their customer journey. And a lot of that information that you hear out there, especially if you're looking for content, is really written more for big companies that have much larger budgets. They have much better data on the full customer journey, and they probably have a larger customer base where they have people who are very aware of their product and continuing to buy. In those cases, those companies need to be present everywhere. They need to be on Google and on Meta and have a really strong email campaign and all of these different things. But for small businesses just starting out, keep it simple. I see too many people either trying way too many platforms simultaneously or jumping into one platform and not giving it enough time to really see if they can make it profitable before they say, oh, yep, that one didn't work. Let me jump over to Facebook. Then, oh, yep, let me try TikTok out. And then by the time they're done with that, now we've wasted a ton of money and haven't really gotten any real results. So I would say pick a platform. We just talked about why you may want to start with Google or Meta. Start with one of those two. Don't get too creative and try something. Those two run, I don't have a number in front of me, but say 90% of the paid traffic that you can really run right now. TikTok is coming up quick, but still those two are the big players. And then I would set a minimum budget probably in the $2,000 to $3,000 a month category. There is a little bit more complex math you can do to figure out exactly how much you should be starting with a budget based on how many conversions you're getting, based on your average order value. But if you're just dipping your toe in, starting out, I would say for most people, you're going to be pretty safe. Maybe say started at like 1,500 up to 3,000, depending on where you are in your business. And a big part of that too, I think that's another reason why it's so important to get started with organic sales coming in and making sure that you have some level of profit coming outside of the paid ads. Because if you're just getting started and you're just hitting ads for the first time or driving traffic for the first time to your site, and you don't have any revenue coming in, doesn't really make a ton of sense to all of a sudden spend $3,000 with no revenue to back it up. So it makes sense to get your revenue flowing first and then figure out, okay, now when do I have the opportunity to put a little bit of that investment into some ads and see where we can take that.
Right. Because it depends on what industry you're in, but typically across most industries, it's going to be a minute before you're profitable. There's some companies, some industries where you can maybe flip on an ad and you start making sales right away, but that's not super common. And especially if you're in more of a service industry or like a local business. So let's say you're running local lead gen or trying to get calls from Google ads for a local service business. The budget's about the same. I always recommend a minimum of about $1,500 if you're doing local lead gen as opposed to e-commerce. But it all harkens back to, you made the comment about being consistent. So picking that platform and sticking with it is so important because it is one of the things that is absolutely killer to the small business efforts to grow, whether you're online or service, whatever based. Because if you just start something, it's a vicious cycle. You say, okay, I'm going to hire this company. We're going to invest $4,000 in over 3 months or whatever. And after 1 month, the business owner's getting anxious. You haven't made a lot of sales or you're not profitable yet. And now you're like, okay, we're going to pull the plug on that. Or I want you to start doing this. Or let's hop over to Facebook. That can be an absolute murderous cycle to be in because once you're on that hamster wheel, it's tough to get off. Because a lot of business owners, it's easy to get in your own way, especially when you're unfamiliar with marketing on the digital side. So in terms of that, the inconsistency versus consistency is always going to win. But when you're working with your clients, how do you set those expectations for, hey, this is how it's going to go. This is what we might be able to expect. Again, we can't predict exactly what the general public's going to do with a digital ad, but we have a pretty good idea. So how do you handle that?
I was going to say, tell every new client who starts, that's what they want, right? Okay, I'm going to put up this much in the first month. How much profit am I going to get? Unfortunately, that's the magic number that no one really knows until you try.
Exactly.
But I think that gets back to the measurement piece that we started this conversation with, is make sure that you understand what is happening when they come in. So oftentimes a big consistency killer is people will say, hey, I ran traffic for 3 months or 6 months, and I didn't really see a big change in my bottom line. But they can't really tell you whether the traffic did or didn't pay off. It might be that, hey, your organic sales really started to tank, and the only reason you stayed flat was that your paid ads picked up the slack. Or worse, it could be, hey, it looks like you had some big growth, so you keep investing, but in reality, the paid ads still aren't doing anything, and it's just all organic growth that you would have gotten either way, and you're wasting your money. So I think the big thing is understanding what's happening when people hit your site and how the ads are performing and making decisions that are data-driven based on that information. And then the other thing, I typically tell people, give it 2 to 3 months. And I say by the end of month 2 or month 3, you should either be nearing profitability or have some really good indicators that you're getting closer to profitability. So if it's a service-based business, even if you haven't closed enough of those leads yet, your cost per lead should be dropping, or your instance of highly qualified leads should be increasing. Hey, of the form fills we got, they're getting better and better quality, that type of thing. Or from a product perspective, we'll say, hey, yeah, maybe we haven't quite hit profitability, but we're starting to see our ROAS closer to the break even, or even we're seeing a lot more people begin checkout. And of those people who are beginning checkout, we're seeing a much higher percentage completing the checkout and ultimately making a purchase. So some of those like key indicators that are going to start to look a little bit better even before you hit true profitability, you can look to those. I probably wouldn't let them run too much longer than 2 to 3 months, but I typically tell people that is by the end of 2 to 3 months, let's look for break-even profitability, or at least some really good indicators that you're seeing some improvement that's trending towards profitability.
With any past clients of yours, do you find that your ads will lead to exposure of cracks in their infrastructure? Meaning you spend a lot of money, they spend a lot of money with you on running ads. You guys do a great job. You bring them a lot of traffic, but let's say the sales aren't quite there. And you start looking at certain data points that tell you, well, they made it to the lander, but maybe the UX is terrible, or maybe the offer isn't good.
Yeah.
Have you run into that?
Yes, those types of things happen all the time. And it's a great thing to be looking out for as you're starting your ads, or even as you're starting to get that organic traffic in. But there can be a lot of indicators of that. So you want to know not only how many purchases did you get, but how many people are adding items to their cart, how many people are beginning checkouts, and then from there, are they completing the funnel and making the purchase? And some of the problems that you point out, we see all the time. Big one is if you have, say, a clothing type product where there's a lot of different variants of a single product. If you look on Google, all those variants typically roll up together so that when you click, I may be an extra large or somebody else may be a small. If I click through because I see that yellow t-shirt and I want to go and buy, but then it's not available in my size, even though Google was advertising that as the small variant, it's not very clear that that was the small variant. I just saw the picture of the yellow t-shirt. So I went ahead and clicked on it, got to the page, and then there was never a chance that I was going to buy. It was a bad lead to begin with because they just don't have my size in that item. Those types of things are true killers where it's pretty obvious when you trace through, when you hear that story, you can say, oh yeah, of course, that would be a bad lead. We've got to find a way to resolve that. But that's something that's really easy to lurk under the surface if you're not digging in and figuring out what's happening when people hit the site and are they making a purchase. And the same goes for services. A lot of people, you find that, hey, when they hit one of the specific service pages, they never convert. And then you find out sometimes it could be as simple as, oh, that page is just down. We see that type of thing, like 404 error type issues. But more importantly, it could be, hey, it's a great page, but that particular service is just not really clear what you're offering to somebody. So they get confused and ultimately balk. Every time they hit that page, it's just confusing what the offer is, and they never really come through with a lead form. Some of those are pretty common errors that, especially for new businesses getting started out, they're almost certainly, before you start really analyzing some of this data, you're certainly going to have a few of those things going on. So you got to be keeping an eye out for them and resolving them as they come up.
Absolutely. When it comes to making adjustments, when you set a strategy out with a new client, is that strategy set in stone for those 60 to 90 days? Or is there a lot of adjustments that go in on your part or your team's part because it's really easy to launch an ad, maybe not get the type of results you were hoping for out of the gate, and then to scramble and start making adjustments. But I imagine you follow the data. How do you handle that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's going to be different per platform. So Google is a little bit of a simpler setup. There's a little bit fewer levers to pull, I would say, once we get it set up. So for the most part, we're going to let Google run a little bit longer. We'll be digging in and analyzing to make sure that nothing is amiss. So certainly if there's any errors in the campaign setup, those are the types of adjustments that you need to be making. If you say, hey, I only offer my services in this town, but I came in and realized that I'm actually running ads that are reaching the full state or the full US, that type of thing, like fixing those types of errors, those adjustments should be made immediately. Don't worry about sending the model back into learning mode or anything like that. But then outside of that, Google will tell you, you're going to want to wait 2 to 3 weeks between making adjustments before you're making the next adjustment. So if you're going to try a new targeting technique, or you're going to really add in a new ad group to see if it's a different customer persona that you're targeting, you can't just do that and then it doesn't work. And then 4 days later, you're killing it and adding a new ad group, that type of thing. And then Facebook, you can make some changes a little bit more quickly. So there, I think you're looking at least for about a week of data to come in before you really start to make a lot of changes. But because there's a lot more testing of creative on the Facebook side and testing different images, videos that are going out, even ad copy, those you should have a pretty good idea after a week or two if your click-through rate is particularly low, that, okay, let's pull that and add something different. But I would say really across both ad platforms, especially as you're getting started, a big philosophy is keep it simple. You shouldn't be running 1,000 ads, 1,000 ad groups, a million campaigns, all these different things, because one, it's going to be too confusing. You're not going to understand what is and isn't working in the first place. And two, every time you add a new campaign or a new ad group, what you're essentially doing is splitting that budget investment in half. So now we have the same budget, but we're splitting it to two different things we're testing now. We see this all the time with inheriting accounts from other agencies. And you go in, there's 15 different campaigns running on that same $1,500 to $2,000 budget. You're like, well, I can't really tell you, even after a few months of running, I can't really tell you too much because this campaign only got 55 clicks over that entire period type of thing.
That's because it had like $4 a day to work with.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a really important piece of it, is that, yeah, there's the time frame, and don't make adjustments too quickly. Keep an eye on it. But more than anything, keep it simple. And the simpler you keep it, the more quickly you'll be able to make changes and pivot and get to where you want to go.
I don't want to get too technically into the weeds because we could go all day, and honestly, that could be a month-long course. But on Google Ads, I want to shed a little bit of light in how these, I'm going to use Google specifically because it's mildly similar in terms of auction style budgeting compared to Facebook. But when it comes to keywords and phrases and bidding on them, how do you go about, and I'm sure your prospects are curious how you go about this too, when it's, how do you know what terms to bid on? How do you do that keyword research? What tools do you use to get that started?
So these days it's becoming more and more, when we're doing the work, we're typically using ChatGPT or another generative AI tool to do that quite a bit more often. There are tools, you'll hear Ahrefs or SEMrush, different kind of keyword research tools. Honestly, even making the search that you would expect somebody to search for in your Google browser and just seeing that people also search for list is another good area for options. But again, the way everything is moving, it's more and more automated. So the specific terms you're looking for are less important. So just taking the example of a t-shirt. If you're looking for yellow t-shirt, there's a lot of very specific themes you could get on there, a lot of long tail keywords you could add. However, if you have a pretty generic yellow t-shirt, you don't need to put in keyword targeting for yellow t-shirts and small yellow t-shirt and yellow t-shirt in my or near me or something like that. All of that expansion happens automatically through using different keyword matching types. Google is going to say, hey, you told me that you're trying to sell a yellow t-shirt. Now I'm going to go ahead and find the searches, even if there's slight variants of that, that match the intention you were trying to sell. We ultimately need to keep a close eye on that and make sure Google is making those decisions smartly and using negative keywords to turn off the wrong ones. But ultimately, you're looking at maybe between 5 to 20 keywords that you're targeting for most campaigns. And for some of the newer tools like Performance Max campaigns, you're not putting any keyword targeting in at all. So there's no need to go really in depth on a lot of keyword research that historically has been a really big part of the job of managing a Google Ads account. But for my money, the best tool that you can use these days is one of these generative AI platforms like a ChatGPT, where you can start, it's more strategic. It's following the, let's identify the customer persona who would be interested in this product. Then from there, let's identify the terms that they would be using to search for the product. And then from there, let's identify the headlines and descriptions that best match with both my product as well as the search terms that that customer persona is going to be using. And obviously, you really need to be focused on, you got to check your work, essentially. There's a lot of times you'll get bad stuff back as well. So that's where the human interface really needs to come in, and you're tweaking and filtering out terms and tweaking and changing terms as well. But I think that these days is becoming a pretty indispensable tool in the tool belt.
So what's a good rule of thumb for how many keywords and or phrases should be in a given campaign?
It depends. There's another level between campaign and keywords too, is ad group. So you're going to want one ad group per ideal customer persona is the way I think of it, or per unique differentiator or selling point that you're going to run an ad around. So at that ad group level, it's different based on what you're searching for. Ultimately, the answer is as many major terms that people may be using to search for either that particular customer persona would be using or to search for that particular benefit. So it's going to be different for every campaign. But as a very rough rule of thumb, typically we see somewhere from 5 to 15, maybe about 20 on the very high side. I don't think I'd go much beyond, say, 15 or 20 in a given ad group or campaign.
Got it. Got it. So this is a question that it just came to me, and I'm very curious about your response to it because I get it all the time. I'll meet with a business owner and the dream is to be number one on Google. Every time someone searches anything related to my product or service, I want to be number one. Andy, get me to number one on Google. How do we do that? And I imagine you get that question too, but it's so much more complicated than just being number one on Google with paid search. Now, you could probably drop 50 to 100K a month in Google ad spend, and that would go a long way to helping you be number one more consistently. But what do you say to a client? Use the recommended budget, but in terms of ranking, is there a metric that you use to be able to tell them that? Or is it a response where, hey, there's going to be times where you are ranking number one, but based on the search, based on the location, based on the competition, based on the competition's budget, it's going to be different. How do you handle that?
Yeah, there's so many different avenues to answer that question, different ways to go down. There's a few different metrics that give us a pretty good idea of how we are performing in the auction and what's happening. But typically, the short answer is, hey, we shouldn't be looking at whether we're number one or number three. We should be looking at the cost per lead in the case of a service-based business, or the cost per purchase, or the ROAS. So all that to say, it's all a bidding model. So the higher up you are in the rankings, it's based on two factors. One is how good of a fit you are for that actual search they're making. And two, how much you're willing to bid for it. So it may be that in order to get to that number one top spot, you'd be spending so much per click that even if they do sign up to be a lead or make a purchase, it's still not profitable. And if you only bid enough to get up into that second spot, you're not going to have such a good click-through rate necessarily because they're going to be clicking the top spot more often. But remember, you're only paying when they do click. So you're paying a lower amount per click. And then maybe you still have a pretty good chance of closing the deal and ranking when they hit the site. So all that to say, that one metric, it's an important metric, how high up you are in the rankings. And it's definitely an input metric that goes into that profitability calculation. But at the end of the day, you could be higher up or lower down and still be profitable. So really what you want to focus on is that profitability number and making sure that you're profitable.
Yeah, because you can bid on terms that are less CPC, less cost per click, serves more of your budget, but maybe it's a lesser search term, but it could be very high converting for you and your business. So it would make far more sense to keep your budget reasonable, but bid on different terms that might be much more high converting. Because like you said, if it's not going to be profitable, you might get that number one spot and you might get a lot of sales from it. But if you're paying through the nose to be consistently at the top, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And hopefully, I think that conversation right there should go to show how many different factors there are involved. So there's how profitable is it when you get a bid at a different position and they come to your site? And that's all per keyword. So that might happen over 5 to 10 different keywords that we just talked about. And then each one of those keywords might have a ton of different long tail variants that go into each one of those keywords. So there's so many different ways to think about it and manage it, so many different factors that go into that ultimate profitability number that you with the human brain can't really figure it out quite as well as the automated model can. So that is a big issue that we see people make. There's times where you want to make sure that you're capping ad spend or capping cost per click. But one of the big errors that we see a lot of new accounts make is they're only focused on cost per click. They're running their accounts and saying, hey, I want to run this campaign and I want to hit exactly a cost per click of $3 or $2 because I think that's what's going to ultimately make me profitable. When in reality, Google's moving everything towards these automated models that say, hey, don't give me the cost per click for each individual search term. Just tell me that, hey, this is my daily budget or my monthly budget. And we're going to go ahead and run your ads in the best possible way. We're going to show up on the best terms of the ones that you showed for us in the best positions to ultimately maximize your profit. So the bidding model is called maximize conversion value or maximize conversions. And that's really where you want to be, much more than we always say, anytime you try to outsmart Google, you're typically going to lose in the process. So don't worry too much about saying, oh, here's one factor I picked that was, I want to be number one more often. Or even, hey, here's one factor, it's cost per click. Or here's one factor, the click-through rate. Because as soon as you start managing just one of those factors, you're going to ultimately hurt your bottom line profitability.
Yeah, and the search engines and the platforms like Facebook, these algorithms have gotten so smart, even just the past 8 to 12 months. I know on the Facebook side, targeting, in my opinion, I think targeting is going to be done in the next year or 2 years, probably less, because the AI has gotten so strong that it now scans your ad copy and your ad creative to figure out who to send your ad to. And it, honestly, I've tested it. It does it seamlessly. I had a client, we did a very obscure type of service in the local area, and it crushed on lead gen ads. And there was absolutely no targeting outside of age and location.
Exactly.
It's unreal. So I imagine Google is, I know they just did a core update too. I'm sure they're heading in that direction as well. Is that true?
And yeah, Google's been that way for a number of years now, where Performance Max is their main automated campaign type that time and again outperforms a lot of different campaign types. So similarly, we might use some level of keyword targeting if we're running just a pure search campaign, but we're not using a ton of interest-based or audience-based targeting. We just let Google handle that.
Absolutely. So going back to our main point of how to start and grow your business profitably with paid ads. If we're just starting out in business here, we decided we're at that level. We've listened to Andy. We said, all right, we've got a little bit of money coming in. We've got proof of concept. People like our stuff. We're growing organically. We want to put some fuel on this fire. Let's say for sake, we'll hit up your wheelhouse of e-com. Which platform should I invest in first, Facebook or Google?
So I like Google for e-com as getting started out. So it's actually the opposite answer that I think a lot of people will tell you for e-com and product-based businesses that oftentimes are very visual. So they perform really well in that kind of visual space in Meta. But the reason why I like the idea of starting out on Google for a lot of different products, this isn't for every product, but the nice piece is you have that high level of intent. So yeah, Facebook is great that you can show a really beautiful picture of your product and you can really highlight some of the key benefits, and that can work really well. However, you don't necessarily know who you're showing up in front of, and they may not be looking to buy your product at that moment. You're just interrupting their day. So that's where I think having that level of intent is probably the best way to get you some initial purchases. The way I think about it is Google is often your quickest path to initial first purchases, but then it's not as scalable. So you can usually get profitable, hit a ROAS is the number we usually use to measure profitability, is return on ad spend. So oftentimes you can even hit a higher ROAS in Google than you would be able to hit on the Facebook platform. But then as you start to scale that up and say, hey, I was profitable by spending $2,000 a month on Google or $5,000 a month on Google or $10,000 a month on Google, I want to double that or triple that. Oftentimes that ROAS doesn't go quite as far on Google because there's only so many people searching for your product. So you only have that intent for so long until you've maximized that audience. Whereas on Facebook, it's a little less intent based on each individual interaction. You may be a little bit less ROAS, a little bit less profitable on that ROAS basis, but it's much more scalable because you don't have to wait for somebody to be looking for your product. You can show up in front of them wherever they are in their journey. So I typically try to push people in that direction of start on Google, find profitability first, and then as you're looking to really scale up and expand your audience base, that's where Facebook is really going to be the stronger tool to grow further.
Yeah, it's focus, dedicate your budget, and be consistent. Because if you're, like we said earlier, if you're pulling the plug, you're just never going to gather that data and understand. But yeah, I think that's great advice. Getting that start on Google that can help you get to profitability a little bit quicker. That's definitely sound advice, because Facebook, it can be a long slog, especially if we're looking at e-com as the example. People don't just roll out of bed and click purchase, even though we feel like a lot of us do, or maybe we have in the past. But overall, as a strategy, without having warmed up an audience, especially if you're new to the game, Google, definitely the way to go. All right, so Andy, I want to start bringing the boat back to shore here. I think I'm always trying to put myself in the position of a lot of our listeners that are either at the beginning stages of business or they want to hop into business. One thing I would be curious is if I'm at that point where I'm about ready to start investing in paid advertising, I'm of the mindset that I might know a little bit enough about a platform to be dangerous, or maybe I took a course, or maybe I learned a little bit about Facebook or Google. But for me, I know I'm wiser to find a who can help me with the how. If I'm a business owner at that stage looking for an agency or company, or maybe a marketer or a freelancer to work with on these types of things, what are the questions I should ask of you if I were to be looking to work with PPC Pitbulls or of any agency, company, or person out there? What are the questions I should be asking to make sure I'm covering my bases and I'm getting set up with an agency or someone who can help me in a very positive manner?
Definitely. So it's a tough question to answer generally. A lot of this is going to be business specific, and you've got to make sure ultimately that you find somebody that you're comfortable with, that you trust, and you're willing to work with, knowing that, hey, you're putting some money at risk here, that even the best agency in the world can't guarantee Google ads or Meta ads success. So you want to have somebody that you really feel has your best interest at heart. But outside of that, on some of the technical questions, I think it's easy to ask, hey, how do you feel about conversion tracking? What are you doing for conversion tracking? What's your general philosophy there? And on that answer, the answer should be, hey, I have a strong answer of how we're tracking conversions. And before we start running your ads, we're going to know exactly how many people purchased coming from the ads. That's a non-starter, non-negotiable if you're not getting that kind of answer back. Similarly, we said that, hey, it may be 2 to 3 months before you're really profitable, but the agency should be able to give you reporting on what exactly has happened pretty immediately. So, hey, if I've been running ads for 2 weeks, are you going to be able to tell me within the first 2 weeks how much I've spent on ads, how many clicks I got, and from those clicks, how many purchases I got? Again, if they can't answer that question, that's really non-negotiable. Another big thing would be all this different automation talk that we just talked about. So this is maybe a little bit tougher to analyze if you're not really familiar with the platforms at all. But very broadly speaking, I would say, hey, what's your philosophy on automated bidding models? And I think we're almost officially at a point. You'll still have some agencies that'll tell you, no, everything's got to be manual. I got to control things. I see that less and less in the marketplace, but I would say we're at about a point that if somebody tells you, no, don't use automated business bidding models, they're not going to work for you, like never use automated bidding models, that's a big red flag. That's the way that both Meta and Google are moving. And even if you put up restrictions in place to make sure that you're protecting your budget and you've got a system, anybody who says, no, we don't use automated bidding models, that's not a good sign. Definitely, I wouldn't go that direction. But I think with those two answers, and then ultimately asking somebody, it can often feel like a black box. But as somebody who's now going to be giving a bunch of money to an agency, you really deserve to get good answers and to feel comfortable with where exactly is your money going, what is the strategy that we're using here, and in terms that you can understand, and why wouldn't we do this strategy or that strategy. I always say from an agency owner perspective, don't question strategies too much, in the sense that oftentimes that can drive an agency relationship awry. If you say, hey, no, we have to use this type of targeting, or we have to do this, don't get too specific. But if you're not sure about a strategy and you don't know why they would be trying this when you think that maybe they should be trying this, you deserve an answer to that. And they should be able to explain why the path that they're proposing is the right path or the path that you should go. So I think that all gets back to just having somebody that you feel is being transparent with you, that you understand what they're planning on doing and what their strategies are. They can explain that to you. Maybe the last thing too, long-term contract. I'm typically anti-long-term contracts, and that could be different levels for different businesses. Sometimes there's setup fees involved, so agencies do have to lock you in for some time period to recoup those setup fees. But typically, if you're starting to go much beyond 3 months, we just said that, hey, we should be trying to find profitability in the first 2 to 3 months. So I wouldn't want to necessarily sign up for more than 3 months worth of contract where you're going to be locked in if you hit that point and ultimately aren't profitable. And now you're locked in for another 6 months, or I've heard of people signing year contracts before even. And it's just, you don't need to be committed for that long a period of time.
Yeah, I see that a lot when I meet with potential customers, because it's, oh, I'd love to work with you, but man, I'm under contract for another 8 months with this company. And it's like, really? There's still places out there doing that? It's just, I don't know. We could rail on that for days, but it's something to be wary of, because I think from the agency side, that kind of leaves a little bit of a taste in the mouth of the customer that we don't believe in what we're doing, or we need you to commit to 12 months because we need that long to show you results. Now, don't get me wrong, digital advertising can take time, right? It takes time. But like you said, it's at 2 to 3 months. You can very well tell if you're at least on the path to profitability if you aren't yet already. in that amount of time. So there's really no reason to sign yourself up to something long-term that is tough to see from the get-go.
Exactly. I agree with that.
Awesome. Andy, I really enjoyed our conversation today. I think we shed a lot of light on the Google and the Facebook, the paid ads side of getting to profitability with paid ads within one's business. I'd love to be able to have our listeners reach out to you. What's the best way to hit up Andy?
Definitely. You can find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow or reach out to me there. Or probably the best place is ppcpitbulls.com. We have a number of free resources. We run our own podcast and also a newsletter there. And I also offer a few slots per week, a free strategy session. So basically, we'll sit down for 30 minutes, go through whatever problem it is that you're facing or trying to figure out in your paid ads or marketing journey. And you'll leave with some insights on what the next best step for you to take is. So yeah, I always hope people will take me up on that. The best part of my week is meeting with new businesses and new people starting businesses. I think that's just such a fun time.
I love it. Well, folks, you heard it here first. Grab a consultation with Andy. At least figure out, maybe get a little bit of strategy in place to help you see a little further down the road. Folks like Andy can help you see around the corner. So, Andy, thanks again, man. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let's give it up for Andy Janaitis. You know, as I got to thinking about this discussion with Andy, I was once again reminded of all the different ways that you can market and grow your business. Then I got to thinking about how Andy has been able to create a successful business from the knowledge and skills he's gained, and how he can use those same skills to help him grow so many different types of businesses. And then I just got to thinking about all of the opportunity there is out there right now at our fingertips, ripe for the taking for anyone who is willing to put in a little bit of effort. There are truly a million different ways to make $1 million, and there are an infinite amount of ways within those ways. The key is picking one and starting down that path. Adapting and adjusting as you go is part of that. And as Justin is always saying, effective action will give you effective feedback that will help you know what to do next on your journey. But that key is action. That's the one thing all successful entrepreneurs have in common. So if you're not in the action train yet, if you're not on that action train yet, I invite you to hop aboard today. And if you are, what actions can you do to take your game to the next level? So again, a big thanks to Andy for coming on the show today and dropping some serious golden nuggets on us on how to start and grow your business profitably with paid ads. Now, coming up in our next class, we are talking all about franchises, and more specifically, non-food franchises, and how maybe starting a business that already has proven systems and processes just might be what you're looking for. And another note, we've also got a 4-part master class sales series with my good friend and fellow friend of the show, Sean O'Shaughnessy. It's going to be action-packed because, look, sales is the lifeblood of any successful business, and he and I covered a ton in that series. So stay tuned for those and many more value-packed episodes right here on the Millionaire University podcast. This is the only school where you're going to graduate rich and not broke. Until next time, this is Professor Guerin signing off from sunny Cincinnati, Ohio. Class is dismissed.